I'm going to do an extension to building block 1. I discussed in building block 1 about the use of long tree gaffs and pole gaffs, retirement of the spurs themselves, what you are and aren't allowed to do. Had quite a few people private message me and ask me for details. Don't ask me why they didn't look up their own instruction manuals from the spur supplier. So what we're going to do is just touch on a couple of items which hopefully will strike some interest, and you can make sure that the spurs that you have or are using are fit for purpose. So let's have a closer look at a few of them. The first we'll choose is the Buckinghams, and you can see from the top there it applies to aluminium, steel and titanium. We'll just go to a couple of points of interest. I excuse the highlighters, I got a bit carried away when I was reading it. It says there, completely read and understand the following, all instructions, warnings and guidelines. So if you haven't read your instructions for Buckingham, you're non-compliant. Buckingham prohibits the use of aftermarket components such as, but not limited to, rope ascenders, etc. being used with Buckingham climbers. It goes on to say, Buckingham climbers must not be drilled, tapped, riveted, bonded, welded or have any other means of attachment performed to or on the climber. And it says clearly here in the orange, under no circumstances pole gaffs to be used for to climb trees. Down below it also explains some of the pitfalls when you're changing your gaffs to your climbing irons. Your climbing irons are often set for a pole and a tree. So if you have a tree gaff on a tree one, you can see the heights are about right. If you apply a tree gaff to a pole iron, it hangs right down and goes below where you're standing, and vice versa, it sits up very high on a pole iron. So you need to be mindful of that. The next brand we're looking at is Panther. I would say that they have got a similar idea. The user of the spurs should be properly trained or supervised by a competent person or an instructor. So we've got to define what is a competent person or instructor, that they meet the requirements here. The maximum load is 130 kilograms. That's the climber, harnesses and all his gear that he's got with him. When it comes to the lifespan of the Panther's spikes, there's some interesting things. Only occasional or seasonal once a month. Clean them carefully and store them. That gives you 10 years of lifespan. If you use the climbing spikes more than once a month, store them correctly, the estimated lifespan is 5 years. If you work with them every day and store them correctly, the probable lifespan will be 2 years. So that means after 2 years, if you're a daily user, you're going to have to replace them. It also goes on to say, with your use, always use all safety elements and be secured with a safety rope and lanyard. So that means while you're climbing, they appear to be asking, when you're climbing, you're going to have to be roped in as well as a lanyard. The next brand is Geckos, aluminium climbers. Again, I got carried away with the highlighters. If we look down here, must only be used together with a harness, lanyard and overhead life support line. In other words, you can't use these geckos unless you have an overhead life support line. It goes on to say up here, for the geckos, chainsaw use together with tree climbers is not recommended. The user assumes all risk and responsibility for damage, injury or death, which may occur during the following use of a chainsaw together with these climbers. It goes on to talk about always climb with appropriate gloves, safety goggles, helmet with a face protector, long sleeve protective clothing and protective boots. That means you need to have safety goggles and a face protector to use these gecko climbers. Always use a positioning lanyard around the climbing pole or tree and an overhead lifeline. So it reinforces that you've got to have a lifeline while climbing, as well as a lanyard around the tree. In the green here, it's to do with the lifespan, And it says clearly, with normal usage, in normal conditions, it could be 4 to 6 years is your lifespan. So with the Klein tools, it says here very clearly that the pole climbing gaffs, they give the serial numbers of them here, and the tree climbing gaffs, they give the serial numbers there, ending in 07. One thing I like about the Klein tools is that it says, although pole climbing gaffs are shorter than tree climbing gaffs, they use the same gauges to sharpen them. So that's a very handy thing for them. Klein specifies what a tree climbing gaff length is and what a pole climbing gaff length is. So they have differentiated between the two. So you can see now that it's important to get hold of those instructions from your manufacturer and read them. It's a good starting point for learners in your groups to be able to go through those and understand, ask questions. But more importantly, you need to know when you have to retire items, the sort of wear and tear and care, the length of gaffs you should be using. It may be that you get away with the shorter gaffs or some medium length gaff right up until the point you need to have traction in a thicker bark tree or rotten tree. So if you're reaching to do any work positioning and a gaff gives out underneath you at a crucial moment, or you're rigging a block and it gives out and you inadvertently drop something, that becomes a dangerous event and could in fact impact people on the ground. So my suggestion is maximum traction, get used to them, but read those directions from your manufacturer and abide by them. If you're really against them, change the manufacturer. As far as I'm concerned, a set of gaffs that you've got to retire every 2 years as a high-end user, that's probably not what I'm looking for.